Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam, ala Rasulillah, wa ala alihi, wa sahbihi, wa man wala. Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak, everyone. This is your host, Haroon Sellars. I'm the audiovisual manager at Zaytuna College, and it is an honor and a privilege to welcome you all to today's live stream focused on answering your questions related to paying your zakat. Joining us are two of Zaytuna College's faculty members. We have Dr. Abdullah Ali and Dr. Talal Ahdab, and I'll just briefly mention their bios in short. Dr. Abdullah bin Hamid Ali is an assistant professor of Islamic law and prophetic tradition at Zaytuna College in Berkeley, California. His course teachings include prophetic tradition, commercial law, family law, inheritance law, jurisprudential principles, and Islamic virtue ethics. MashaAllah, it has been an honor and privilege to know him for the time I've known him. And we also have someone who has just recently joined the Zaytuna faculty team, MashaAllah, and that's Shaykh Dr. Talal Ahdab, MashaAllah, who serves on the MA faculty at Zaytuna College. He pursued a rigorous and structured classical curriculum with Islamic authorities, with a focus on Islamic theology, epistemology, ontology, language, jurisprudence, and legal theory. Over the last 20 years, he has been teaching the Islamic disciplines to senior students, as well as professors of Islamic studies. His research interests include exploring how modern challenges can be addressed through Islam's rich tradition of knowledge and scholarship. Alhamdulillah, it's an honor to welcome him to Zaytuna College and to Berkeley, California. Alhamdulillah. To get things started, we'll just have some introductory remarks from Ustad Abdullah, inshallah, and then we'll proceed with answering some of your questions, which you can enter immediately in the Q&A box. Ustad Abdullah, Bismillah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salam, ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wa sayyid al-mursaleen, nabiyina wa habibina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to welcome everyone to Zaytuna College's live stream related to the issues of zakat. And this particular live stream is also an official launch of our new Zakat Calculator, which you can find on our website, which was put together in collaboration with all of the the law faculty at Zaytuna College. I wanted to offer just a few words related to the importance and the virtue of paying zakat and charity, first and foremost, before we move to the Q&A. And of course, I'll leave some time for Shaykh Talal to offer any preliminary ideas or comments that he may have as well. But I wanted to sort of just mention some things for the purpose of review, that we all as Muslims, we know that zakat is one of the pillars of Islam. And as a matter of fact, that zakat is mentioned in the Quran in conjunction or in connection with salah 82 times to emphasize the importance of salat and zakat going together, or to say that two of them are the two of the most important of all the pillars of Islam. Of course, after accepting Islam, what we call the Shahadatain. It was something which was encouraged by the previous prophets. It is something which is shared between what we call the Abrahamic religions, in the sense that all of our particular faiths, they emphasize the importance of the relationship between the Creator and the creation. And as many have said, that the way that we would define or summarize our teachings is a devotion or service to God, and then the service to humanity. The prayer itself it reminds us of the importance of the connection between ourselves and the Creator, while zakat itself reminds us of the importance of the connection between human beings. Without wealth, without property, without an economy, human beings cannot survive. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed us here to worship Him, and without wealth, without property, such as food, among other things, then the human being would eventually go into extinction, and then the ultimate purpose of our being here on earth would not be fulfilled, would not be realized if that were to occur. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, of course, clearly given some people more than others, and He has obligated us to purify our wealth. And in the process of purifying our wealth, we purify ourselves. If anything, when we look in Surah At-Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seems to suggest that the ultimate reason for the obligation of paying zakat is to purify ourselves. And so in one verse He says, وَخُذْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ صَدَقَةً تُطَهِّرُهُمْ وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ بِهَا وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِمْ. And take from their wealth a charity, a sadaqah, by which they are purified and made to grow. The word zakat itself, linguistically, it is synonymous with purity, growth, and increase. Tahara wa nama wa ziyada. And so in the Quran, it is utilized in this particular fashion. At times and other times utilized to refer to this particular integral or this teaching of the Islamic religion. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the human being to grow, wants us to purify ourselves. He wants us to feel the pain of our fellow human being and to provide for them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also does not allow for us to spend this wealth in any way that we want to, that He has designated 8 particular categories of people who actually are recipients of the zakat. And for this particular reason, zakat cannot be looked upon as like just simply a regular tax, as we will look at where the government takes taxes from people and just simply utilizes those taxes in any way that they deem fit. Even though, of course, we know the governments are supposed to utilize taxes for the general benefit of the society. And one last point I just want to make is that the payment of zakat and charity is connected with sincerity. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually doesn't refer to zakat in the Quran as zakat, at least not in most of the verses, but in the main verses that we utilize to emphasize the obligation of payment of zakat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala utilizes the term sadiqah, charity, which is a cognate of sidq, which means honesty. And in one hadith of the Prophet, he said, as-sadaqatu burhan, that charity is proof. Proof of what? It is proof of true faith. And some say it's the cognate of sadaqa, which is friendship. You know, as I say, that individual is attaching or emphasizing or improving their relationship with the Creator by removing the attachment to worldly things, right? By purifying one's wealth and accepting the friendship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's interesting that in this sort of Tawbah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the verse about how this charity will purify the individual. He mentions this verse after a number of verses where he's speaking about the hypocrites. He speaks about the hypocrites. And then he says, take from their wealth a charity from which they are purified and made to grow from it. And it's interesting as well that we find the word infaq, or to spending in the way of Allah, is connected as well, is also a cognate of hypocrisy, is also a cognate of the word nafiqa, which was a type of hole or home of an animal, a desert animal known as the jarboa, who actually would dig a hole, or it would dig a hole, you know, in order to enter his home, and then have an escape compartment at the end. So if one of the predators would come to it, that it would go into the hole and then run out the other hole, right? So of course, the intention of all this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wants us not to try to evade the payment of zakat, as many of us, we evade taxes or attempt to evade taxes, perhaps potentially at times. But this is an important pillar of Islam, and I just wanted to offer these introductory remarks before we begin the Q&A. And if Shaykh Talal has anything to offer, who actually Shaykh Talal could have, you know, done this entire broadcast by himself, but alhamdulillah, you know, he's been gracious, and you know, and so I'm here with him to ride on his coattails, as we would say, inshallah. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Talal Ahdab and I'm a new faculty member here at Zaytuna. Welcome to everyone. MashaAllah, Shaykh Abdullah articulated himself very well and told us everything that we need to know about zakah and very short introductory remarks. If I may add anything, it would be zakah, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, this is like the impurities of our wealth that we get rid of. It's like our bodies have impurities, and we get rid of our impurities when we go to the restroom. So zakah is like getting rid of the impurities of our wealth. And it's like taking our wealth to the restroom to get rid of this impurity. For us, it would be getting rid of the impurities. For the one receiving it, it would be their right, because this is their property, this is their wealth. They own this amount, and it is in our pocket. At the end of the year, instead of owning 100%, we own 97.5%. And those recipients of zakah own the rest. But they're still in our pocket, so we have to give them their rights and give it to them. It's very interesting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, in Surah At-Tawbah, when mentioning the 8 categories, if we were to look at those 8 categories, we will see that those 8 categories actually touches many layers of society. It's not a secret to all of us that our conditions can change at any time. We may live today in an affluent way, and tomorrow an earthquake may happen. Something may come and destroy my business. A war may come and destroy my country, and all of a sudden I find myself as a refugee somewhere else. I used to run a business, I used to have wealth, and within overnight I have nothing. So our life is always in a dynamic, it's always changing. And zakah is one of the ways that Islam deal with these things. So in those 8 categories, we see that the layers of society could be those that cannot do anything. They cannot do a job. They may be handicapped. They may have some physical disabilities, and they're poor, and their income they have a deficit way more than their income. There are those who have a deficit less than their income, and then there are those. So those layers addresses those who cannot find a job, who don't have wealth, who may have physical disabilities, or those who are able to work, but they cannot find opportunities. So this also creates an opportunity for wealthy people to provide opportunities for those who can work to find jobs. And then there are those al-amilina alayha. These are public servants. Those are those that work for the Department of Zakah, or those that work to collect zakah, or those that work to calculate your zakah, and so on and so forth. There are those that are called al-mu'allafa qulubuhum, and in some schools they could be non-Muslims. In the schools that I'll be talking about, it's about Muslims and new Muslims, and it deals with how to integrate new Muslims and those that hearts are to be reconciled in society, how to integrate them. So it's about integration, and it could also relate to national security in many countries. Wafir Riqab deals with liberation of slaves. Islam encourages us to become free and to create the environment and the channels and the conditions for people to become free and appreciate their freedom. Al-Gharimina alayha are those in debt. Those are in legitimate debt, not in gambling debts or any other debts, but those that are in debts and they find themselves unable to pay back their debts. Islam takes care of them. Multiple layers of society. You may be living in a good life today. Overnight, your condition may change. Our conditions may change. And then there's a category called fi sabilillah, and it's been generally understood to mean those voluntary people who are defending the Muslims against transgression. But the last one is actually very important. It seems it's very interesting. It's called Ibn Sabil. It seems that Islam is the only religion that takes care of those that are passing by, travelers. And this affects business sector, it affects the tourism sector, it affects many layers of society. And so if someone is traveling and find themselves in difficulties and they need help to get back to their country, they need help to repair their car, they need help to, Islam makes sure that those people passing by, even if they have money in their home country, but they don't have access to that wealth right now, the community takes care of them and makes sure that they return to their home place safely. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned in one hadith, and I will just end with this, that what the Prophet ﷺ mentioned is that toward the end of time, that 15 things may take place, and one of those 2 things, he says, if my community, my ummah, considered amana as a gain and zakah as a fine. As Shaykh Abdullah mentioned, zakah is supposed to cleanse and purify and grows. And in the Arabic language, the original meaning of zakah is increase, but not just in quantity, is also in quality. Is as the ulama of the Arabic language would say, is النماء في العدد والجودة ذاتا ومعنى. So it's not that my tree is growing, but also it's better than other trees. The quality is high quality. So when we give zakah, we're not just purifying our wealth, we're allowing our wealth to grow in a blessed way, in a qualitative way. And the Prophet ﷺ says that when you give zakah or when you receive zakah, say Allahumma ja'alha maghnama wa la taj'alha maghrama. Oh Allah, make it a gain for us and don't make it a loss for us. And toward the end of time, if we consider zakah to be like a tax, something that we have to pay, something that's a fine, something that's a loss, then our mindset is not where it should be. So inshallah, with this, I'll stop here, and jazakumullah khairan for attending and listening to Shaykh Abdullah and people here at Zaytuna. And Brother Haroon, will you?
Barakallah Feek. Thank you so much, Shaykh Abdullah and Shaykh Talal, for your introductory remarks on this important subject, which I think is illustrated by the number of questions we received already in the Q&A box. MashaAllah, we have 19 here on Zoom, and we also have some coming in as well on Facebook. And so I think I'll try to be fair, and I'll take one question from each platform at a time and do what we can, inshallah, to get through as much as possible to serve the people, inshallah. So the first question on Zoom is from Muhammad. He says, Assalamu alaikum. Is zakat owed on revolving inventory for a business? Is zakat owed on revolving inventory for a business?
Yes, this is, the rotating goods that zakat is due on revolving inventory. And as far as I know, this is consistent throughout the schools. And even if the individual hasn't collected, right, the invoices that are due once the time to zakat is due. So at the end of the year. So fundamentally, 2.5% of that, whatever the inventory is, the value of the goods, of course, at the end of that 1 year that one has, and then also in addition to all the other wealth or surplus that one has. And of course, if I missed anything, the Shaykh Talal, he can add to that.
Yeah, mashallah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. We will go to a question from Salim on Facebook who says, can I spend my zakat to purchase Islamic books and distribute to Muslim and also non-Muslims?
Shaykh Talal.
Well, in the ayah of the Quran, in Surah At-Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ. And in 4 categories, the letter lam is used. And the letter lam in Arabic has many meanings. In this context, the letter lam implies ownership. So there must be this concept of ownership. And then in the latter 4 categories, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word fi, which is zarf. So there is tamlik, but zarf. So as long as they are in that condition. So when we talk about tamlik, we're talking about the transfer of ownership. It's not just I distribute books or I allow people to eat food. Transfer of ownership implies that you own something and you transfer that ownership to that person. When that person receives it, it becomes his. He can do with it whatever he wishes. If he wishes to buy books, he can buy books. If he wishes to eat, he can eat. If he wishes to spend it on their basic needs, they can do so. But the transfer of ownership is important, and the Shafi'i and the Hanafi school, and I believe the Maliki, Shaykh Abdullah, what would the Maliki say on this?
Well, I mean, but I'm sorry, what to say about, like, in terms of the purchase of books with zakat money? That's what you're saying. So I think that was the question. That's what I understood from it. Basically, the question was, and that question was that, is it permissible to utilize zakat money in order to purchase books for the purpose of da'wah? Now, that's fundamentally what the question is, right, Haroon? That's what you're understanding from it?
That was, yes, that's what I got from it. It seems like they wanted to use some, I guess, money that they determined was zakat for those purposes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is, of course, is a very, very subtle issue. It's something. Of course, I'm Shaykh Talal is, I think he would, I defer to him more than anything else. But I just wanted to raise a couple of concerns. Is just that we have to understand that if we were to say yes, then fundamentally we're doing an analogy. We're analogizing that particular with something among the 8 categories, or one or more of the 8 categories, which we find in the Quran. Is not listed, of course, among the categories of those in the Quran which would be allowable for us to give zakat to. However, I mean, there's some general categories like fi sabilillah, in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which originally was a reference to the purchase of munitions and weaponry for the defense of the ummah. I could see someone potentially giving a fatwa to say that, yeah, sure, that you can utilize for that reason. But I'm not comfortable with saying personally right now, just on the spot, that yes, that you can utilize zakat in order to purchase books so that you can give da'wah, especially if this particular effort is a way to give you some type of income. Right. If it's a basis for you getting some type of income from it, then I don't believe that itself will be valid, personally. But again, it's a very subtle issue, and we just have to be very careful once we extend the meaning of the verse into something as new as that. So That's that's my thinking on the issue right now. But ultimately, I would whatever Shaykh Talal says is how we go with at the moment.
Yeah, I would agree with that, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Next question from Zoom asks, when calculating zakah, is it calculated on the entire 401k balance, or do we calculate it on the balance left after accounting for taxes and any applicable penalties? There are always taxes, and usually there is an additional 10% early withdrawal penalty for those under retirement age.
Right. Yeah, that's a disagreement on this matter amongst a contemporary fuqaha, but the position that the Zaytuna has taken on our website with relationship to the Zakat Calculator is that you would subtract all of the taxes and penalties from your 401k prior to entering that amount into the calculator.
Okay, thank you for that. So next question from Facebook. I think it's Brother Mumtaz. He asks, is it better to pay zakat to those close to us in our own community, or is it just as equal to pay to a big organization such as Islamic Relief, USA, or others?
Well, the school that I follow maintains that zakah is a local obligation. So you pay zakah. There are people that would qualify to be an eligible recipient of zakah in our local communities. So first we try to give it to those that are in our local communities, and any surplus we may send it elsewhere. Shaykh Abdullah?
Yeah, I believe that's the same position largely be fine in the Maliki school as well, or at least the understanding I have of the Maliki school too, is that you should focus on those who are closest to you, because every region, every city, every country has their needy people, right? And so there are people in those societies who are concerned with trying to find those people whose needs need to be fulfilled, right? So you begin at home, or it's to borrow a phrase from a hadith of the Prophet, which it relates to something a little bit different, but he says, "Ibda bi nafsika, thumma biman ta'ul," that you start with yourself and then with those who are dependents, right? When it comes to providing for other people's needs. So yeah, it's definitely. I think very attractive to a lot of people, because I know that a lot of people would say that, okay, well, I can benefit more people if I give it in another place, because it doesn't cost that much to actually to provide for them, provide for their needs. And so I definitely get that, and I do believe it's a legitimate opinion. But I do think that that the madhahib, they have emphasized the importance of focusing locally first before you go outside of your locale. Allahu a'lam.
Barakallahu feek. The next question we have is from Munir on Zoom, who asks, please explain the different opinions on how zakat is calculated on investment real estate. Is it different if you plan to hold it for 5 years or for a longer period of time, say 30 plus years? How do you pay zakat on the value of the real estate if you don't have liquid cash?
Shaykh Abdullah will answer this.
Well, this is one of those areas where the Malikis actually, they stick out, they stand out from the other three schools because, again, of course, Shaykh Talal can correct me on this, but that the other three schools, when it comes to trade goods, that they don't make a distinction between whether or not you're talking about rotating or non-rotating wealth, or wealth you plan to, you're holding on for a long period of time to try to maximize profits, or wait until there's high demand or something like that. Whereas the Malikis make a distinction between the two, whereas if you're talking about rotating income or renewable income, which is, you have stocks there or goods that are constantly coming in and going out, that those, you pay zakat on the value of those every single year, all right? Even if you haven't collected, right? As long as you have the intention to to utilize those goods for the purpose of trade, then you have to pay zakat on them. When it comes to something long term, like for instance real estate, that the Malikis actually say that that you only pay zakat on those once you receive payment for them, right? So even if it's after a number of years, so because it's just the nature of those type of transactions.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Barakallah feek. Okay, we'll take a question from Facebook from Reshma, who says, Assalamu alaikum. May Allah reward you for this session. When calculating asset and liability calculations, how is the current nisab calculated these days and deducted from total zakat amount?
How is what?
Let me repeat the question. When calculating asset and liability calculations, how is the current nisab calculated these days and deducted from total zakat amount?
Well, let me just say a couple of words about nisab first. Nisab is an amount that the Sharia specified that if one has savings above this amount, then zakah is due. At the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was the nisab was 20 dinars or 200 dirhams. 20 dinars, i.e. gold. Dinar used to be made out of gold. 200 dirhams, that's silver. Dirham used to be made out of silver. And at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, 20 dinars equals 200 dirhams in value. So at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the nisab, whether you take the gold as a reference or whether you take silver as a reference, it has the same value. Over time, the value of gold and silver fluctuated and it started to vary. And at one point in time, silver became actually more expensive than gold because it became more rare for a short period of time, I believe in the 16th, 17th century, something like this. Today, gold is worth almost 10 times as much as silver. And the nisab of your wealth, if you take the gold standard, is around 85 grams approximately, a little bit more less, a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on how you calculate it. And in terms of silver, is around 600 grams of silver approximately, which in monetary value, 600 grams of silver is almost like $300, while 85 grams of gold is over $4,000. You always look at the current value of gold and silver at the time where you have to pay zakah. I'm not sure I understand the question, but if one has assets that are higher than either the nisab, whether it's valued according to gold or according to silver, then one has to pay zakah. The question becomes tricky if the amount of cash I have, the amount of savings, is between $300, say, and $4,000 US. Then do I need to pay zakah or not? If you follow the Hanafi school, they may encourage you to pay and to consider the lower nisab according to silver, so that more people can benefit from zakah. Shaykh Abdullah?
Yes, I wanted to also just mention that I think that what a lot of Muslims don't understand is that, as you pointed out, that during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when the zakat became an obligation, that the currency that they were utilizing was gold and silver, whereas we live under a new system where gold and silver are not considered to be the foundations or this is not the the medium of exchange that we utilize anymore. If anything, gold and silver is now commodities as well, right? Where in the past they were not considered to be commodities. So what's happened is that the jurors have had the responsibility to become a bit creative, I guess you would say, do ijtihad, and that they decide, well, okay, since we don't utilize gold and silver, and we have this new fiat currency that we utilize, what will become the basis for what we call nisab, or the sort of the quantum or the payout threshold, which an individual must possess prior to zakat becoming an obligation. Because basically the way that it works, for people who may not understand this, is that first and foremost, what we have to understand is that zakat is paid on surplus wealth, right? Which you've had for an entire year. But your year begins once you possess the nisab, which is called nisab, or the quantum amount. So for instance, if you're basing your nisab on gold, let's say roughly $5,000, right? You have in savings. Once you have that your year begins, right, from that point, right? So if after a year you still have $5,000 and more than that, right, then you have to pay 2.5% of that, of which we call your zakatable amount. Your mukhraj is zakat itself, 2.5% of that. Now, this doesn't mean that you're required, that you have an obligation to save it once you get it, but basically it just happens that if it happens at the beginning of the year, you have the nisab, and at the end of the year, you still have it, you have to pay 2.5% on that and anything above it. So scholars decide, okay, well, most of the calculators that you will come in contact with, utilizes the gold standard, right, for the nisab rather than silver standard. Our particular calculator, one of the unique things about it is that it allows for you to choose either silver or gold. And silver, if anything, according to the vast majority of the scholars of hadith and fuqaha who acknowledge this, is that the standard, or the silver standard, is stronger than the gold standard, right? When it comes to the hadith literature, that almost any of all the hadith that talk about the gold standard or the gold nisab are weak in some way, some particular fashion, right? So some scholars even argue that the standard for the gold, which was during the time of the Prophet, actually was based upon an analogy made with the standard for silver, right? So fundamentally, we're just giving people an opportunity to try to do zakat in the soundest way possible, right? So some people choose one, some people choose the other, but since we're not dealing with both gold and silver currency, we're left to make an analogy that, okay, use either one or the other, and so at the end of that year, if you still have those savings, then you pay your zakat on it, inshallah.
Barakallahu feekum. Next question we have from Zoom, from Jawad, who asks, or who says, Assalamu alaikum. My employer gave me stock compensation last month that will vest after 3 years. Is zakat due on it after 3 years when it vests, or is it due on unvested balance as well after 1 year has passed? Jazakallahu khair.
Shaykh Talal.
Abdullah.
تفضل. Well, the issue, again, what's important here is that if you actually have the ability to extract the some value, right, from a type of property which has been gifted to you, then you would have to pay zakat on it. If you don't have the ability to do so, that's something different altogether, right? Because, if someone, and more so, it may be seen as more of a promise, right? To, okay, this is a gift, but you can't do anything with it. You can't benefit from it until after a few years. Then there's not really any good reason, according to my understanding, to say that the individual has to pay zakat on that. But I would imagine that there would be some disagreement about that particular issue. Again, it's just simply on the spot thinking on this particular issue. So, but this is something, a vested stock, right? and so vests after 3 years. If you're not able to get anything from it right now, then I don't see a good reason to say that you'd have to pay zakat on it. Wallahu alam.
Right. So my understanding, the same as Sheikh Abdullah, is that the company gave you stock options that will be vested over a certain period of time. As long as they're not vested, you don't own them. Once they're vested, then you begin ownership. If you have no other savings and no other cash, then you start counting your year from the time you own the stocks and it's above the nisab, and you will have to pay zakat on it a year later. If you already have cash, then you add it to the cash that you have and you follow the year that you're in, and you'll pay zakat at the end of that year once the stocks have vested. And if they vest over a period of time, let's say every year they give you 20% over 5 years, or in your case, they said, we'll give you stocks and they'll vest 100% in 3 years, then 3 years from now, that's when you own the stocks. And that's when the zakah rules applies to them.
Barakallahu feekum. We have a question from Tony Conrad on Facebook, who says, as a cookie manufacturing company, do I pay zakat on inventory of raw material and supplies? We have no pending orders.
Zakat on raw materials and supplies. He's asking about paying zakat on raw materials and supplies from a cookie making company, I think.
Yes, as a cookie manufacturing company, do I pay zakat on inventory of raw material and supplies? We have no pending orders.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Sheikh Abdullah, do you understand it?
Yeah. No, actually, no. He wouldn't pay any zakat on that. Because this is like the items, the type of machinery which is required to run a business, or like, for instance, your business property itself. Those things are not meant for resale. So the things that are meant for resale are the types of goods that you would pay zakat on, but not just the raw material that you've purchased in order to start the business itself.
That's what he meant. Okay. Yeah, in business, you only pay zakat on the trade goods that you acquire with the intention of resale. But if you have a factory, if you have machinery, if you have trucks, if you have cars that you use for transportation and those things, if you have computers, if you have desks, you don't pay zakat on those.
Barakallahu feekum. I'm going to take a question from Zoom that I think is a less complicated question, but I think possibly very common. Someone asked, because these are related to cash and also debt. If cash on hand is basically just enough to pay expenses, do they need to pay zakat? And that's combined with the question of somebody asking, if one has debts of almost $200,000, are they supposed to pay zakat? So I think we can kind of combine that type of question.
Right. So the first question was, if someone has cash on hand, which is only enough to pay for their expenses, like monthly expenses, right? Would they have to pay zakat?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Well, again, what's important is whether or not the person had savings, right, for an entire year. That's what's important. That the amount of savings you had, or the amount you had in your bank account, for instance, or however you saved your money, it was with you in your possession, for a year, right? And if after the year that hasn't, your saving hasn't, been reduced below the nisab, then you have to pay zakat, regardless, right? And the fact that you may have expenses coming up, now, of course, it all depends on how soon we're talking about, right? So, but if and if those expenses are going to wipe you out completely, right, where it's going to bring your wealth below the nisab, then that's a different story altogether. But if you still have an amount which is, is equal to or above the nisab, even with those expenses, that you would be required still to pay zakat on it, according to pretty much all the schools I'm familiar with. Shaykh Talal, have anything to add to that?
No.
And I think there's also, there's another part of the question, which is what was that section part?
Yes, thank you. If one has debts of almost $200,000, are they supposed to pay zakat?
Well, having debts of up $200,000, really, it only means something if the individual intends to pay off those debts prior to the due date for your zakat payment. So if you have those debts and you also have savings, which are equal to or above the nisab, then unless you're planning to pay off those debts before you pay the zakat, and as a result of it, it brings your nisab below the standard, then there's no basis for us saying that you don't have to pay the zakat in that situation.
Yeah. In the Shafi'i school, that is irrelevant. But in your case, maybe you're talking about debt resulting out of a mortgage or out of something.
Right.
So it could also be case by case. You may want to take it to a local scholar that you know about, and he can look at your case more carefully.
You're right.
Barakallahu feek. We will take a question from Facebook. Assalamu alaikum. Does a debt obligation such as a home purchase plan installment have bearing on one's quote-unquote wealth calculation?
Yeah, I think that was similar to the last question. But again, I think that what some people may be thinking is that, well, okay, I just purchased a house and it's worth $300,000, $500,000, and I'm looking at the total cost of the house. And I'm saying because I have this total cost, and that's an exorbitant amount of money, and I should be exempted from zakat. And I don't think that that's the way that you deal with it. You don't deal with it or calculate it that way. You base it on how much surplus you have right now, how much savings you have right now, and if your monthly payments, for instance, if you were to pay your monthly mortgage, if that reduces your nisab, then that's a different story altogether. Then I would say, yeah, sure, you don't have to pay zakat in that situation. But if you're looking at the long-term debt and you're bringing together the total amount and value of the house, then no, there's no that would not exempt the person from having to pay zakat.
Barakallahu feek.
It's the same thing in the Shafi'i school, and what I heard from Imam Tahir in the Hanafi school, long-term debts are irrelevant. So it would be the same.
Barakallahu feekum. There was a quick follow-up point of clarification from Tony Conrad, who owns the cookie company, when he who asked earlier, do I pay zakat on inventory of raw materials and supplies? We have no pending orders. And then they wrote back, he or she wrote back, Salam again, I'm sorry. I meant that we are sitting on inventory we purchased and have, such as flour, sugar, eggs, plastic containers, etc. But due to the current situation, with the COVID crisis, we are not producing any cookies, Barakallahu feekum. So does that weigh into the answer?
Yeah, I think still it's still the same thing. Unless they're selling flour and eggs and all these other things, if they are selling those things, then that would be, I would say, okay, you have to pay zakat. But if they're just talking about the raw materials, if you're just talking about the raw materials that you use to make the cookies, then there's no reason to think that you would have to pay zakat, right? Because this is just simply the raw materials for your business.
And Tony says, Barakallahu feekum.
Oh, yeah.
That's good.
Okay, back to Zoom. Assalamu alaikum. How much zakat does one pay on retirement accounts? Jazakallahu khairan.
You take that one.
Yeah, there are various retirement accounts. They go by different names. In Canada, they're called RRSP. There are also some registered retirement plans. All those are money that you own. And they're maybe now in a different format. Instead of being in a bank, they're in a different account. And that, if that's considered part of your savings, then you'd have to pay zakah on that amount. And again, if there are taxes that will be taken, if you were to liquidate that amount, if taxes are taken, then you can deduct those taxes and penalties from the amount that you have in the retirement plan and pay zakah on that. Sheikh Abdullah.
No. I think you said it.
Barakallahu feekum. I know we're almost at the 2 o'clock point, but I would like, with both of your permissions, to at least continue for another 10 to 15 minutes, which I allowed in the beginning for people to actually join the chat. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, fine.
Barakallahu feekum. Okay, we'll take the next question that's on Zoom. Actually, one that was accidentally entered into the chat area as opposed to the Q&A box where we want people to put questions. But Brother Muhammad from the UK, this is an interesting case concerning a well. I wanted to buy a well for those who need it, but have been told that is sadiqah, not zakat. Could you please confirm?
So he wanted to utilize he wanted to use zakat money in order to dig a well. That's what the question is, I'm assuming.
I think so. Let me repeat that. I wanted to buy a well for those who need it, but have been told that that is sadiqah and not zakat. Can you please confirm?
Yeah, I believe so. That it's sadiqah. That's not zakat. The zakat is, again, it falls under the 8 categories of recipients mentioned in the Quran. That those that's where the wealth, zakat wealth, is supposed to go. Definitely is an amazing, a great undertaking, right? You know, a great blessing involved in it. As a matter of fact, the Prophet ﷺ in one hadith, when he was asked, you know, what is the best thing that one can give in charity, and he said water, right? So you know, so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you for that. But zakat has its own specific rulings, and it's very, you know, strict in a lot of ways, you know. So I don't believe that would qualify as a zakatable type of endeavor. Allah.
Inshallah.
Barakallah Fiq. The other question that he had entered there was, I have an Islamic mortgage. The balance of that mortgage is far greater than any savings I have. Is this classed as debt or rent? As these linked to a house which I will eventually own, how shall I represent the mortgage in your zakat calculator?
Again, so this is similar to a couple of earlier questions as well. And as I tried to explain, that you can't look at the total costs or the total value of your property or the total cost of your value of your mortgage over 15 or 30 years and then say, okay, well, this is how much debt I have. That you base it upon what your current debts are, you know. So if you're expected to pay that off right now, that's one thing. But if you're only going to be charged your monthly mortgage fee, then you would enter that, right? That your current mortgage fee would qualify as a part of the debts or your liabilities, I guess you would say, that you would enter into the calculator.
Barakallahu feekum. We will now go to Facebook and take a couple questions from Brother Bilal, who asks, what are your thoughts on paying zakat on stocks using the current assets methods? In other words, 2.5% times shares times value of current assets of the company, and not the market value of stocks if the intention is long-term investment? Is it permissible to pay zakat to a family member living in the same household who has no source of income for the purposes of continuing education or a marriage fund, living expenses, etc.? Those were his two combined questions. And I can repeat them if
That's a
needed.
long one, yeah. Yeah, Sheikh Talal, if you recall.
Yes, please repeat the question, the first one.
Sure. He asked, what are your thoughts on paying zakat on stocks using the current assets methods? In other words, 2.5% times shares times value of current assets of a company, and not the market value of stocks if the intention is long-term investment. That was the first question.
I believe that if one has stocks, then one would pay on the current market value of the stocks at the end of the year, at the end of the lunar year, and not on the book value of the company or the current assets of the company. Sheikh Abdullah, would you?
No, I agree with that. I concur with that, yeah.
All right.
Okay. Excellent.
question?
I'm sorry. Yeah, the second one that he asked right after that was, is it permissible to pay, and I think a lot of people may have this one as well, is it permissible to pay zakat to a family member living in the same household who has no source of income? In other words, for example, for the purposes of continuing education, marriage fund, living expenses, etc.
The general rule is that one cannot pay zakah on those that one is obligated to spend on.
Right.
So neither ascendants nor descendants, nor one's wife, for example. One can pay zakah on relatives who he or she does not have an obligation to spend on them. So if that person belongs in the first category, he cannot pay zakat to them. If that person belongs to the second category, then they can pay zakat to them. And it's better to pay zakat to relatives if they are needy and if they are righteous and if they are needy and if they are related by blood to the person, as long as they're not obligated to spend on them by the Islamic law. Shaykh Abdullah?
Yeah. Yeah, I concur. I do believe there's I think that maybe either Abu Hanifa or some of the Hanafis have an opinion that obligate spending on any needy relatives, even beyond parents, children, and wives. Of course, after I'm just thinking back to something that I read in Qawanin Fiqhiyah, if I remember that correctly, but it's something I have to check. But yeah, generally it's exactly the same thing that Sheikh Talal mentioned here. So that if they're a dependent of yours, or if there's someone who, like for instance, one of your parents who no longer can provide for themselves, that they become they're your obligation for you to take care of your parents financially. So you could not give them zakat, but you can give perhaps a cousin or uncle, aunt, or a brother, sister. So what I'm talking about is that the opinion that I'm thinking of, that I'm almost certain of, that it exists either in the Hanafi school or the opinion of Abu Hanifa, is that it wouldn't even apply to blood relatives. It would have to go outside of blood relatives. Wallahu a'lam.
If that's the case, then you can't even pay zakat to those people. Yeah. All right.
Barakallahu feekum. We'll take one from Zoom, the next one from Zoom, from Sister Aisha, who says, is zakat al-mal due on a savings account you use on and off for daily household expenses in the Shafi'i school?
Yeah, zakat is due on. So what you do to calculate zakah is, as soon as your savings or your cash or your assets reaches nisab, that's when the year starts. So I don't have a choice in choosing the beginning of the year. Owning a nisab amount decides when my year starts. So if the cash in the savings account or another account is above the nisab, then one starts calculating 1 year. And in the Shafi'i school, they maintain that throughout the whole year, the amount must remain above the nisab. So in the beginning of the year, it needs to be above the nisab. During the year, it cannot dip below the nisab. If it dips below the nisab, then the year is interrupted and you start a new year. But assuming that you start with the nisab and the nisab remained and the cash or the savings remain higher than the nisab amount, at the end of the year, if your cash or savings is higher than the nisab, then you pay zakat 2.5% on that. Whether you're using that saving account to spend on your expenses or house expenses or other stuff, it will not affect it.
Yes, and the Maliki is the same as that. You know, if the account goes under the nisab between the two ends of the year, then once the nisab returns, then you start a new year. Your new year begins once again. The Hanafis is different. The Hanafis only look at the start and the end, right? So even if it goes below,
if it dips below, yeah, doesn't matter.
And you still have to pay zakat on it.
So maybe let's take this opportunity. So if it's cash, you have to look, the beginning of the year starts with owning an amount higher than nisab. If you're doing business, the beginning of the year starts with acquiring trade goods with the intention of resale, whether it's below the nisab or above the nisab. At the end of the year, if one has a business, we look at the value of the trade goods, and if they are above the nisab, then one pays zakat on them.
Barakallahu feekum. This is also, I think actually the next ones will take words from some questions received in advance, but I can also see have been repeated here in the live Q&A. And actually, I'm going to combine a couple of these because I think they're related. How do we know if organizations that claim to be zakat eligible actually are?
Well, one way to test that is to look at the verse in Surah At-Tawbah, which lists the 8 categories of recipients of zakat. This is become somewhat of a crisis, I guess you say, in our current times, where you have a lot of organizations claiming to be zakat eligible, and they may not be, or a certain organization, I don't think that they would qualify. And so we have those 8 recipients there who's eligible to receive zakat. Of course, certain types of zakat can be analogized, or the meaning of the classification or category mentioned in the Quran can be expanded, right, to include others who share the particular rationale or characteristic which led to them being declared a recipient. It's no doubt about that. You know, because we believe in legal analogy, that we accept that. But I do think we have to be very careful that zakat does not become, as the Quran says, dulatan bayna al-aghniya, right? That it becomes a matter of circulation between only the well-to-do or the rich, right? Because almost every organization, or not every organization, but a lot of organizations that are new are claiming zakat eligibility. You know, so what potentially happen is that we'll start to ignore the actual poor people, fuqara, masakin, wabn sabil, and the gharimin, and others like that, where we start to give all of our wealth to just simply Muslim organizations.
Barakallahu feek. Appreciate that. Back to Facebook from Sister Reshma, who asks, if a minor child inherits cash funds that are saved for his future, is his guardian required to pay zakat from that account?
So in the Shafi'i school, zakat is on the wealth. So as Shaykh Abdullah quoted the ayah, خُذْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ صَدَقَةً, take from their wealth a mandatory sadaqah. So in the Shafi'i school, they consider the zakat to be it's on the wealth, whether a person is a child below the age of puberty or above the age of puberty, whether a person is insane or not insane, whether a person has Alzheimer or does not have Alzheimer, whether the person has dementia or doesn't have dementia. The status of the person does not enter into account. It is the wealth. So if a child inherits $1 million from his parents, his or her parents, then there is zakat due on that money. Of course, the child will not pay zakah himself. The guardian will take out from the wealth of the child and pay zakah on his behalf. If the guardian does not pay zakah on the child's behalf, then the child, when they reach the age of puberty, then they'll take care of their own affairs and they'll pay zakah and also make up of whatever years they missed of zakah, if they happen to follow the Shafi'i school in that mazhab. So it's an act of ibadah, and at the same time, it's also zakah is on the wealth, on the money. Maybe in this regard also we need to mention one thing that we didn't mention, I believe, in this hour, and we should not end the webinar without mentioning it, is the aspect of niyyah. When we pay our zakah, we should have the proper intention that we are paying our zakah. In the Hanafi school, zakah is an act of ibadah, is an act of devotion, and zakah is obligatory on people who are mature, beyond the age of puberty, not on children. And that's where it differs between the schools. In the Shafi'i school, if one asks about the mazhab of the Shafi'i school, yeah, zakah is on the wealth, whether a person is a child or not a child. Shaykh Abdullah?
No, it's exactly the same. The Maliki position is the same as the Shafi'is, and and I'm glad that you mentioned the Hanafi position, which is it's different. So it's the Hanafis that the child would only have to pay it once the child reaches puberty. So,
Barakallahu feekum. We will close, inshallah, this webinar at 2:30 even, inshallah. We thank our teachers for their generosity and extending this time for us for such an important issue. So I'm just going to try to take the last couple of questions I can that have perhaps more wide applicability. Assalamu alaikum. There are a few years in the past that I did not pay zakat. Is it too late to fulfill that obligation?
No. That was an easy one. No, never too late.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, great. And then we have, I think this was also, could be applied to the person who asked earlier, who owns the cookie business. From Facebook, Abdurrahman Chowdhury asks, is zakat due on a business that is not yet profitable as it is brand new?
It depends. It depends on whether or not the business has goods that it intends to sell or not. If the business has already amassed a certain number of goods that they intend to sell, then they would have to pay zakat on those goods at the end of every year. Of course, along with the condition that it's nisab and above. But if you're just talking about if it's a manufacturing business, that's something different. If you're planning to create things and you don't have any goods to sell yet, then that would be not zakatable, according to my understanding.
Barakallahu feekum. Back to Zoom, we have a question from Sam who asks, do gains to the inventory from the current year, are they calculated, or is it calculated once the gain is maintained in inventory for 1 year or longer?
Shaykh Talal, you can take that. Repeat the question now.
The
Sure.
gain, what is meant by gain? Let me see if I understand the question. And by gains, I'm assuming now that the person asking the question meant that they had some goods and then they sold them, and there is gain from selling trade goods. Is that correct?
Inshallah, I'll repeat the question. Do gains to the inventory from the current year, is that calculated, or is it calculated once the gain is maintained in inventory for 1 year or longer?
If the gain is added to the inventory, then the whole inventory belongs to the same year and is calculated at the end of that year. You don't have to start a new year for the gain of the inventory.
Barakallah fiqh. Okay, let me go right back to Facebook real quick.
However, let me say something. In the Shafi'i schools, and I believe also maybe in the Maliki schools, there will be some cases where you may need to start multiple years. And we will not go into details. We can go over these case by case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Exactly. I think it's. I've seen. It is a point. It's mas'ala khilafiyya. It is definitely. Right. Yeah. So, but I do think that your original answer was a good answer. But there's some. I think this might be a question that maybe the individual probably should contact someone. Maybe the local mufti or someone like that.
Local mufti would be. Yeah.
Great. Barakallah fikum. Back to, Facebook. That's where I was headed. From Brother Muhammad asks, he says, Assalamu alaikum. If someone is renting out his or her property and using that rent money for his or her daily expenses, is zakat being applicable of that rent? The value of the property is high and that person doesn't have any savings to pay the zakat from that property. What would be the ruling in that case?
There is no zakah on rental property. There is zakah on the income that you produce out of the rental property. If it is above the nisab and you hold it for 1 year, and at the end of the year, it's still above the nisab. Mm-hmm. There is no zakah on your house that you live in. There is no zakah on the car you live in. There is no zakah on the property that you buy in order to rent. But there is zakah on the rental income. If you buy a house with the intention to resell, that becomes a trade goods, and there is zakah on the value of that house. As long as the house is a rental property and you're not putting it on the market for resale, then you only pay you only pay zakah on the income of that rental property.
Barakallah fikum.
So after you pay your expenses and your basic needs and everything, at the end of the year, do you have more than the nisab? That's when you pay zakah.
Barakallah fikum. Okay, related. Well, I think this is a good one to bring us towards our close, because now there are a couple questions about the calculators. Some are asking if they can explain the calculator in terms of how to use it. So if you have any additional remarks about the calculator, that would be great.
Yeah, but the calculator, we've provided some information on the actual calculator itself, which helps to help you to understand exactly how to utilize it. So we tried to preempt the questions that might arise about the calculator. So I mean, if there's still something which is unclear, then perhaps I could answer that. But if you go to the page where the calculator is found, and you'll find it under each particular item which is listed, that there's a paragraph or a sentence above it which is explaining what each particular item is, which particular values or input values are, among other things.
Okay, thank you. We will also take a look at that at the end, inshallah, briefly. What can a woman do if she was previously married and unsure if her husband used to pay the zakat? is this woman responsible for those years if she was working, even if she's almost certain her ex-husband paid? Also, what should she do if she hasn't paid zakat over several years since she divorced? Must she backdate it and pay off all the years that she missed? Lastly, if she regularly gives charity throughout the year, can that count towards her zakat, even if she didn't make clear intention for it to be a time of giving?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about 3 or 4 different questions, I think.
All right. Let's go one by one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So basically, zakah is a fard ayn, right? So it's every individual has to take care of their own zakah. Unless one is a child, the guardian takes care of the zakah of the child. The husband will pay for his own zakah. The wife will calculate her own wealth and determine how much zakah she needs to pay. Whether the husband paid for her, I'm not sure what she meant by that. But in principle, she will have to calculate her own wealth and pay for her own zakah. If she missed a few years, then she will have to make up for those years. As long as she started the year with the nisab, ended the year with the nisab, and during the year, the amount, the cash or the savings stayed above the nisab.
Excellent. Barakallah feekum.
Shaykh Abdullah?
No, alhamdulillah. I think you covered it all. Yeah.
And that answer, I think, 2 questions, but she has like more.
Yeah, I think the last one had to do with intentions. Lastly, if she regularly gives charity throughout the year, can that count towards her zakat, even if she didn't make clear intention for it to be a time of giving?
Right. So zakah is due at the end of the year. So the question that the sister is, through her question, another question is getting raised is, can I pay zakah ahead of time? So in the Shafi'i school, you can pay zakah ahead of time during the year, as long as you began the year with an amount higher than the nisab. And during the year, you started paying zakah in installments or portion by portion before the end of the year. However, the niyyah for zakah needs to be present.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like give money and then I backtrack and say, oh, I gave money to so and so and I give money to so and so, and I forgive that person their debt. And can I consider this to be zakah? That will not work.
Right.
But intention is important. It's an integral part of zakah.
Yeah, I concur that the intention is an extremely important part of this. Is you can't just simply say, okay, well, I was giving charity during the year, and then I decided, okay, well, I've actually given so much charity. Why don't I just count that as zakat? You have to have the intention to actually give zakat for the Malikis as well. And but the Malikis, from my understanding, they will allow you to pay your zakat early if you're talking about maybe 1 or 2 months prior to the end of the year. Or perhaps even 1 month after the due date, that your zakat, of course you don't incur any particular sin if it's a little bit late. But of course, if you intentionally miss it, you still have to pay it into the future, but you may incur sin if you refuse to pay it too late.
MashaAllah.
Excellent. Barakallah feekum. I think that it's all the questions we can take for this time. Obviously, it's clear that we could spend the entirety of today answering such question, and we apologize for anyone who took the time to submit a question which we were not able to get to within the allotted time, and we encourage and advise such persons to please seek help from your local Islamic institutions or masajid or local people of qualified knowledge. And also, we did receive a few questions regarding accessing this recording. This recording of this particular webinar can be accessed immediately on the Zaytuna College Facebook page, as well as early next week, most likely Monday afternoon, inshallah, on the official Zaytuna College YouTube page. So I encourage everyone to subscribe to both of those channels to be immediately notified as soon as we do make a post. And I also wanted to close with a screen share. Where I can take you to the Zaytuna College webpage, where you can access the Zakat Calculator. So I encourage everyone listening to this live or after the fact to please go to zaytuna.edu. That's zaytuna.edu, this website here. And once you're here, you can click on this button here where it says visit our Ramadan site. That will take you to what I feel is a very beautiful and rich Ramadan resources page where you can find the new Zakat Calculator right here and click this button to take you there. You can also access our popular Ramadan Reader, which features essays by Zaytuna College faculty on the 3 phases of Ramadan. You can access supplications for the month of Ramadan. You can access a very important letter and video from our Zaytuna College President, Shaykh Hamza Yusuf. You can access an excellent archive library of amazing Ramadan videos. And what we ultimately hope people will be inspired to do is also invest in the intellectual future of Muslims in America by making a gift. We hope everyone will make some form of contribution, monetary, and also we appreciate your spiritual gifts of your prayers. But in particular, to bring back focus to the Zakat Calculator, once you click that button, here's where you will be taken to a brief introduction of our Zakat Calculator. Brief introduction as you scroll down. And here where the fields now you can enter based on your particular assets. So alhamdulillah, we pray that everyone found benefit in this presentation of some sorts. And we thank our teachers again for the generosity of their time and for sharing with us the gift of what Allah has gifted them with of knowledge and time and insight and wisdom, especially as it pertains to our contemporary context. In that regard, I will ask one of our teachers to please close us out with a supplication, and we ask everyone, inshallah, we pray that everyone continues to reap all the rewards Allah is offering for this month.
Shaykh Abdullah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم ربنا آت أنفسنا تقواها وزكها أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها ومولاها. ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا إنك جامع الناس ليوم لا ريب فيه إن الله لا يخلف الميعاد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Oh Allah, please forgive us, please purify us. Oh Allah, please remove from us this tribulation that we have upon us. Please grant us freedom from our vices, freedom from the dangers of this world and the dangers that will lead us into the dangerous places of the hereafter. Oh Allah, please support us, please aid us, and all of those who are listening, all those on this planet, all of those who are crying for your forgiveness and who are seeking your forgiveness. Oh Allah, please forgive us and guide us on this path, and please continue to grant us to support all of us and to grant us our sustenance and all of the guidance that we need from you, Ya Allah, in these times. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه الأخيار وسلم تسليما كثيرا. وسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون، وسلام على المرسلين، والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين.